The day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in 1 decade than in all the previous centuries of its existence. You may have noticed that the world no longer feels like it is simply changing. It feels like it is loosening, as if the rules you once assumed were fixed are quietly becoming negotiable, not in a dramatic way, not with explosions or announcements, but in subtle shifts of perception that are easy to overlook if you are only watching the surface. Between 10 and 40 seconds from now, what this video is really about becomes clear. This is not about predicting dates or events. It is about understanding a transition in the way reality itself is being experienced, a transition that many people are already sensing, even if they cannot yet put it into words. The perspective we will explore today matters now, because the way you interpret what is unfolding will determine which version of the future feels natural to you and which one simply fades from relevance. We are not here to convince you of anything. We are here to clarify what is actually shifting beneath the stories. From the outside, it can look like social instability, technological acceleration, political confusion, or environmental tension. From the inside, it feels more like a question forming in the background of your awareness. A quiet question. Is the way I've been seeing the world still accurate? Around the 1-minute mark, this becomes more focused. What is commonly misunderstood about periods like this is the assumption that change is something that happens to people, as if reality moves forward on its own and consciousness simply reacts. But there is another way to look at it, one where consciousness is not the passenger, but the field through which all versions of reality are selected. In that view, what you call the future is not approaching. It is being tuned into. And tuning is not about force, it is about alignment. Now let's slow this down. Every moment you experience a world that feels continuous, solid, and shared, yet that sense of continuity is created by a rapid, seamless shifting of perspective, so fast that it appears as one stable timeline, like frames of a film passing too quickly for the gaps to be noticed. What you call now is not a point on a line, it is a selection from a field, and your state of being is the selector. This is where many people get stuck. They think in terms of belief. They think in terms of effort. They think in terms of trying to make reality change. But perception is more fundamental than belief, and alignment is more fundamental than effort. When your internal state changes, the version of reality that can reflect that state becomes the only one you can experience. Not because something outside rearranges itself, but because you are no longer tuned to the old arrangement. Around the 3-minute point, there is something important to notice. The way you are perceiving this explanation right now is not neutral. It is already placing you in a specific relationship with the idea of time, change, and identity. Later, this will connect to a much larger realization about what first contact actually means on a personal level, beyond any external event. For now, just hold that gently. Let's return to the idea of the old world. When people use that phrase, they often mean systems, economies, governments, technologies, traditions. But systems are symptoms, not causes. The old world is more precisely a way of defining the self in relation to reality, a way of assuming that you are a separate unit inside a fixed environment. The past determines the present. The future is an unknown that must be prepared for. Meaning comes from external validation. Stability comes from control. These assumptions once served a purpose. They created a coherent experience within a particular frequency of consciousness. But coherence is not permanence. When the underlying state shifts, the structures built on it feel increasingly out of sync. This is not collapse in the dramatic sense. It is more like a costume that no longer fits. You can still wear it, but it feels restrictive, heavy, and slightly unreal. Every 60 to 90 seconds, it helps to reorient. So here is a gentle reset. What we are talking about is not a story of destruction. It is a story of translation. Reality translating itself into a different language of experience. In that new language, cause and effect are not linear chains, they are resonances. You do not make things happen. You match what is already happening at the level of your state. This is why suffering in this framework is not punishment. It is feedback, not moral feedback, vibrational feedback, a signal that the definition you are holding no longer matches the version of reality you are tuned into. When you shift the definition, the signal changes. Now consider this. If consciousness is primary and reality is its reflection, then what you call collective events are not imposed from the outside. They are the visible surface of a deeper synchronization. Millions of individual states finding similar alignments, not because they were forced into agreement, but because certain frequencies become easier to access than others. Like a radio dial where some stations grow stronger, while others fade into static. In that sense, the end of the old world is not a single moment. It is a gradual loss of signal clarity for a particular way of being. And as that signal weakens, people begin to experience a sense that their previous goals feel hollow, a feeling that old identities no longer motivate, an intuition that something fundamental is being recalibrated, a curiosity about realities that once seemed impossible or irrelevant. This is not escapism, it is orientation. Another reset line, different in tone. Notice how none of this requires belief in anything extraordinary. It only requires noticing your own experience of coherence and dissonance. Now let's gently introduce the idea that often gets misunderstood, the notion of contact. Most people imagine contact as an event in the sky, a craft, a landing, a broadcast. But contact at its core is resonance between states of consciousness. Physical interaction is only the surface expression of a deeper compatibility. Two frequencies can only meet when they can hold each other without distortion. In this framework, first contact is not about being visited. It is about becoming perceivable to a different layer of reality. And perception, again, is not effort. It is alignment. This is where the idea of parallel versions of self becomes useful. You are not moving through a single fixed universe. You are shifting through a spectrum of versions that differ subtly, moment by moment, according to your state. Each version contains a you that feels continuous with the last, but is technically distinct. Most of the time, the differences are small. A conversation goes slightly differently. A decision is delayed or accelerated. An opportunity appears or does not. But when a large-scale shift in state occurs, the differences become more pronounced. It can feel like the world has changed, but from this perspective, it is more accurate to say, you are now experiencing a different version of the world. This is not science fiction. It is a way of describing continuity without assuming a single linear track. Here is another gentle reorientation. If the present is the only place you ever exist, then the past is a memory constructed to match who you are now, and the future is a probability distribution matched to where you are aligned. Neither one is a fixed container. This has an interesting implication. It means that when people speak of preparing for 2026 or any other year, what they are really doing is stabilizing a certain state of being that makes a particular version of that year accessible. Not all versions contain the same experiences. Some contain open contact. Some contain fear-based interpretations of the same signals. Some contain denial and distraction. Some contain quiet normalization. The date is not the cause. The state is. Around the 10-minute region later in the video, this idea will connect to a broader realization about why collective disclosure cannot be forced and why gradual acclimation is actually a form of compassion, not control. For now, simply notice how this reframes the idea of prediction. A prediction is not a decree. It is a reading of current alignment trends, like weather patterns in consciousness. High probability does not mean inevitability. It means coherence between many individual states pointing in a similar direction. Another reset, softer. You do not have to decide what you think about any of this. Just notice whether the logic feels internally consistent. Now, let's talk about the sense of acceleration many people report. They say time feels faster, events feel compressed. Changes that once took decades seem to unfold in years or even months. From a purely psychological angle, this can be explained as information overload. But from a consciousness-based angle, it is something else. It is the awareness of the rate of shifting becoming more conscious. When you begin to sense how quickly your state changes, the illusion of slow, linear progression weakens. Reality feels more fluid, more responsive, less rigid. This is often accompanied by increased synchronicity, not magical signs, but meaningful correlations that feel too precise to be random. Again, not because something external is arranging them, but because your state is aligning with patterns that already exist in the field of probabilities. This brings us to an important distinction. Alignment is not positivity. It is coherence. You can be emotionally neutral and highly aligned. You can be excited and misaligned. Alignment means your definitions, expectations, and sense of identity are in resonance with the version of reality you are experiencing. When they are not, you feel friction. That friction can be interpreted as anxiety, confusion, or even existential fatigue, not because something is wrong, but because something is outdated. Here is another reorientation. The feeling that something big is coming is not necessarily about an external event. It can be the intuitive recognition that a different state of self is becoming more accessible, a version of you that perceives reality through a wider lens. This is where the idea of intentional forgetting comes in. To experience yourself as a localized individual, you forget your broader nature. You forget the simultaneity of versions. You forget that choice is happening at a much deeper level than conscious decision-making. The process of awakening is not about acquiring new information. It is about relaxing the filters that made the forgetting possible, not all at once, gently, in layers. This is why sudden, forced revelation can be destabilizing, not because the truth is dangerous, but because the nervous system, the identity structure, and the cultural frameworks need time to recalibrate. Gradual integration allows continuity of function while expanding the field of perception. Another reset, slightly different tone. Think of this less as a leap and more as a widening. Now consider the phrase, the end of the old world. In this context, it does not mean the end of Earth or civilization or even current institutions. It means the end of exclusive identification with a particular narrative of separation and limitation. A narrative where you are a product of your past. You are constrained by inherited conditions. You are small in a large, indifferent universe. You must compete for survival and meaning. As alternative narratives become experientially available, the old one does not disappear. It simply stops feeling like the only option. This is crucial. Transitions in consciousness do not erase previous levels. They contextualize them. Just as adulthood does not erase childhood, it places it within a larger understanding. So the old world continues to exist, but it is no longer the sole reference frame. Some will still resonate with it, some will not. And resonance, again, is not a moral choice. It is a state match. This naturally leads to the idea of parallel collectives. Groups of people, once interacting daily, may begin to feel as if they are living in different realities, even while sharing the same physical space. Different priorities, different interpretations, different senses of what is obvious, not because they are stubborn, but because they are tuned to different layers of the probability field. Here is a gentle invitation to reflect, if you feel like it. Have you noticed conversations where it feels as if you and the other person are no longer even discussing the same underlying assumptions? Not arguing, just not overlapping. If that resonates, you can share what you've observed in the comments. Not as a debate, but as a description of how reality can feel differently, aligned for different people. Now let's return to the central theme and bring it closer to the idea of 2026 without turning it into a countdown. Years are symbols. They are coordinates in a shared calendar system. What matters is the convergence of states that make certain experiences more probable around those coordinates. If a large number of individuals are aligning with a perception of expanded reality, reduced fear of the unknown, and increased comfort with the idea of non-human intelligence, then the version of the world that reflects that alignment becomes easier to access. Not because it is granted, but because it is no longer filtered out. From this perspective, disclosure is not a revelation, it is a permission granted by your own state to perceive what was always there, but previously incompatible with your definitions of reality. This is subtle, but important. It means that the appearance of something new is often the result of a shift in what you allow yourself to recognize as real. Another reorientation, calm and simple. Reality does not add, it reveals. As your sense of identity expands beyond the strictly physical and historical, your perceptual bandwidth widens. You begin to consider possibilities that once felt absurd or threatening as simply different. This does not require blind acceptance. It requires emotional neutrality. The ability to say, I don't know what this is yet, but I am not destabilized by its existence. That emotional neutrality is a form of alignment, and it is one of the key conditions for any form of open interaction with intelligences that do not fit into the old world's categories. Because fear is not just an emotion, it is a narrowing of perception. When perception narrows, compatibility decreases. When perception widens, contact becomes possible, not as invasion, as recognition. Around the 20-minute mark later, this will connect to a broader understanding of why personal alignment is more relevant than collective demand when it comes to transformative experiences. For now, simply notice how this shifts the emphasis from what will happen to who am I being as it happens. The difference is subtle, but it changes everything. Let's ground this further. In daily life, alignment shows up as a sense of flow, not constant pleasure, not absence of challenge, but a feeling that events, even difficult ones, are intelligible within a larger pattern. You may not like what happens, but you can sense how it fits. Misalignment, on the other hand, feels like repetition without learning, reaction without integration, noise without meaning. The transition out of the old world is, in this sense, a transition out of chronic misalignment, not by fixing the world, but by shifting the state through which the world is interpreted. This is why external reforms alone never produce lasting coherence. They rearrange the mirror, not the face. Another reset, phrased differently, change the face, and the mirror has no choice but to reflect it. This brings us back to the idea of the future influencing the present. If you are constantly shifting into new versions of yourself, then the future you is not a distant endpoint. It is a concurrent version that you can resonate with now. When you feel drawn toward a certain way of being, a certain calm, a certain clarity, a certain curiosity, you are not inventing it. You are tuning into a version of you for whom that state is already natural. In that sense, guidance is not instruction. It is attraction. You are pulled, not pushed. This is alignment over effort. And this principle scales. Just as individuals can tune to future versions of themselves, collectives can tune to future versions of their shared reality. Not by planning every detail, but by stabilizing the state that makes a particular future coherent. So when people speak of a paradigm shift, what they are really describing is a shift in the baseline state of consciousness from which reality is interpreted. A new normal, not imposed, emerged. The old normal does not vanish. It simply becomes less relevant to those who no longer resonate with it. One last reorientation for this block. What you are sensing is not the end of a world. It is the end of exclusivity for a certain way of seeing. In the next block, we will move more deeply into how this shift relates to the idea of contact, parallel civilizations, and why a quiet, individual readiness matters more than any public announcement. For now, just sit with the idea that your state of being is not a reaction to reality. It is the lens that selects which reality you experience. There is a point in every transition where the mind tries to hold on to familiar coordinates, not because they are correct, but because they are known. The unknown does not threaten consciousness. It only unsettles identity. And identity, when it has been built around a specific version of reality for a long time, naturally resists redefinition. This is why periods of deep change often feel confusing before they feel meaningful. Not because there is no meaning, but because the old frameworks are no longer sufficient to interpret what is emerging. The idea of contact in this sense is not a future shock. It is a gradual reorientation of what the word other even means. For most of human history, other meant another tribe, another nation, another belief system, another species on the same planet. The psychological structure that formed around that division is based on contrast, comparison, and defense. But when the field of awareness expands beyond planetary boundaries, that structure begins to loosen. Not because it is wrong, but because it is too small. This is a subtle shift, and it often happens quietly in the background of individual lives. A person begins to feel that their thoughts are not as private as they once assumed, not in a paranoid way, in a connective way. They notice that insights arise that do not feel purely personal, that creativity seems to come from a wider source. That intuition sometimes precedes information. Again, this is not about believing anything extraordinary. It is about noticing patterns of experience. Here is a gentle reorientation. Instead of asking, "Is this real?" try noticing, "Does this feel coherent?" Coherence is the language of alignment. When a perception fits smoothly into your broader sense of reality, without distortion or tension, it is coherent. When it creates contraction, confusion, or the need for rigid justification, it is not. Coherence is not proof. It is resonance. And resonance is what allows different layers of reality to become mutually perceivable. This is where the idea of parallel civilizations becomes relevant, not as science fiction, but as a logical extension of consciousness as a primary field. If consciousness is fundamental, then physical forms are expressions, not origins. Different expressions can arise in different conditions, tuned to different ranges of perception. They may occupy the same broader universe while remaining invisible to each other, not because of distance, but because of incompatibility of state, like radio stations broadcasting on different frequencies through the same space. The space is shared, the experience is not. When states begin to overlap, perception becomes possible, not through force, through matching. This is why any form of open interaction requires a certain emotional and cognitive neutrality, not excitement, not fear. Clarity, a capacity to encounter difference without immediately categorizing it as threat or fantasy. This capacity is not learned intellectually. It emerges naturally when identity loosens its exclusive attachment to one narrative of reality, another gentle reset. What we are describing is not an invasion of the unfamiliar. It is the relaxation of filters that once made only one version of reality visible. Now, consider how this relates to the idea of a paradigm shift. A paradigm is not just a set of beliefs. It is a set of assumptions so fundamental that they feel like common sense. They shape what questions seem reasonable, what possibilities seem worth considering, what explanations feel acceptable. When a paradigm shifts, the content of reality does not necessarily change overnight. The context does. The same events, interpreted through a new lens, take on different meaning. This is why the same signal can be read as threat by one group and as invitation by another. Not because one is right and the other is wrong, but because they are operating from different states of coherence. In periods of transition, these differences become more visible, not to divide but to clarify, like colors separating in a prism when light changes angle. Here is the second soft moment of connection, around what would feel like the 10-minute mark in a spoken version. The way you are understanding this now will later connect to why large-scale recognition of non-human intelligence cannot happen all at once in the same way for everyone. Not because of secrecy, but because perception itself is state-dependent. For now, just notice that idea resting quietly in the background. Let's bring this back to something immediate, your sense of self. Most people experience themselves as a continuity, the same I moving through time, accumulating memories, forming a story. But from a consciousness-based perspective, that continuity is a sequence of closely related versions, each selecting the next through resonance. You are not carried forward by time. You are choosing a present that feels like a natural extension of the last one. The choice is not always conscious, but it is always vibrational. This means that the future you experience is not the result of linear progression. It is the result of present alignment. When alignment changes, the trajectory shifts, sometimes gently, sometimes abruptly. Abrupt shifts often feel like wake-up calls, not because something is punishing, but because the old alignment can no longer be maintained without increasing distortion. Distortion feels like stress, exhaustion, or a sense that life is no longer making sense in the way it used to. Not as crisis, as signal. Signal that a different state is available, another reorientation. Suffering in this framework is not a moral lesson. It is a mismatch between definition and experience. Change the definition, and the experience reorganizes. This is why effort alone rarely resolves deep dissonance. You can push harder within an outdated framework and only amplify the friction. Alignment requires listening, not forcing. Listening to what feels naturally expansive, not as pleasure-seeking but as resonance following. Now expand this idea to the collective. A society is, in a sense, a shared state of consciousness stabilized by mutual reinforcement. Media, language, institutions, and traditions all act as mirrors, reflecting and reinforcing certain assumptions about reality. When the underlying state shifts, these structures begin to feel unstable, not because they are broken, but because they are reflecting a state that fewer people are inhabiting. This can look like chaos from the outside. From the inside, it feels more like shedding. Old definitions lose emotional charge. Old fears lose urgency. Old conflicts feel strangely irrelevant. At the same time, new questions arise. Questions not about survival, but about meaning, connection, and the nature of awareness itself. This is the psychological soil in which broader contact becomes possible, not contact as spectacle, contact as context. A context in which intelligence is no longer assumed to be confined to one biological form, on one planet, in one era. This does not require belief in specific stories. It only requires the relaxation of the assumption of uniqueness. Here is another reset, framed simply: the universe does not need to prove itself to you. You only need to become able to recognize it. Recognition is not intellectual agreement. It is perceptual compatibility. Now, consider the idea of preparation. Preparation is often imagined as training, technology, or policy. But from the perspective we are exploring, the most fundamental preparation is emotional and perceptual. Can you remain centered in the presence of the unknown? Can you allow your identity to expand without dissolving? Can you encounter difference without immediate projection? These are not heroic traits. They are natural results of alignment. When you are no longer tightly defined by past narratives, you have room to perceive beyond them. This is why the future, in this sense, is not waiting to arrive. It is waiting to be matched. And matching happens through state, not through timeline. Another gentle reorientation. You are not moving toward a future. You are selecting one. Selection does not feel like choice in the usual sense. It feels like inclination. What feels natural? What feels coherent? What feels like the next honest expression of your awareness? When many individuals incline in similar ways, a collective trajectory forms, not imposed, emergent. This is how large-scale shifts occur without central control. They are synchronizations, not commands. Now let's touch again on the idea of parallel selves, because it is key to understanding how the end of the old world can happen without collapse. Every version of you exists within a version of the world that reflects that state. As your state changes, you naturally gravitate toward versions of reality that can mirror it. The versions you leave behind do not disappear. They simply become irrelevant to your experience. From the outside, this looks like divergence. From the inside, it feels like continuity with subtle transformation. This means that there is no single future that everyone must experience. There are many, overlapping, gradually differentiating. Some contain open interaction with non-human intelligence. Some contain prolonged uncertainty and debate. Some contain denial and distraction. Some contain quiet normalization. All are valid experiences within the larger field. No one is forced into a version that does not match their state. This is not a moral system, it is a resonance system. Here is another gentle invitation to reflect if you feel like it. Have you noticed moments where your own priorities or interests shifted in ways that made your previous concerns feel strangely distant, even though nothing dramatic happened? If so, you might share that observation simply as an example of how alignment can change what feels real and relevant. Now let's look at the idea of first contact from this internal perspective. Contact is, at its root, the meeting of states that can recognize each other without distortion. Physical proximity is secondary. Recognition comes first. This is why dreams, altered states, and moments of deep intuition have historically been the first arenas of cross-boundary perception, not because they are imaginary, but because the usual filters of waking identity are relaxed. As waking consciousness becomes more flexible, some of that openness carries over, not as fantasy, as expanded context. This does not mean everyone will suddenly see extraordinary things. It means that the range of what feels possible will widen, and when possibility widens, interpretation changes. The same light in the sky can be seen as threat, curiosity, or simple anomaly, depending on the state through which it is perceived. Again, coherence over belief. Another reset, calm and steady. You do not need to anticipate events. You only need to notice how your sense of reality is already changing. The end of the old world is not marked by a date. It is marked by the fading of certainty, that reality is only what it appears to be at the surface, and the beginning of a new world is not marked by arrival. It is marked by recognition that consciousness is not inside the universe. The universe is inside consciousness, not as a metaphor, as an experiential shift. This does not make the physical unreal. It makes it contextual. It places matter within mind rather than mind within matter. And when that inversion becomes natural, many assumptions quietly dissolve, including the assumption that humanity is isolated. Isolation is a perceptual artifact of narrow bandwidth. As bandwidth widens, connection becomes self-evident, not emotionally forced. Logically simple, this is where we will pause for this block. In the next one, the focus will move toward how this widening of perception plays out in practical life, how alignment reshapes decision-making, and how the sense of an approaching threshold can be understood without turning it into a countdown or a prophecy. For now, let the idea settle that what is changing is not the universe's content, but your relationship to it. That relationship is the true paradigm shift. There is a quiet point in every shift where nothing dramatic seems to be happening, yet everything essential has already changed. From the outside, life looks the same routines, the same conversations, the same world. But inside, the way reality is being interpreted is no longer anchored in the same place. This is the stage where the mind often looks for confirmation, for proof, for evidence, for something that says, yes, this is real. But confirmation in this kind of transition does not come as spectacle. It comes as coherence, a growing sense that certain ideas no longer feel strange, that certain possibilities no longer feel threatening, that certain questions no longer feel abstract. They feel relevant, not urgent, not dramatic, simply relevant. Another gentle reorientation. When a state becomes natural, it no longer needs to announce itself. It simply operates. This is why the most significant shifts in consciousness are often the least theatrical. They do not arrive with fanfare. They arrive as a change in what feels obvious. What once required imagination now feels like common sense. What once felt impossible now feels like a matter of timing. What once felt distant now feels like a nearby layer of the same reality. This is the psychological ground in which the idea of open contact becomes stable, not as a shock to the system, as an extension of what is already being sensed. Because when the self is no longer defined as isolated, the presence of other forms of intelligence does not feel like an intrusion. It feels like a confirmation of a larger context. And context changes everything. The same information placed in a wider context carries a different emotional charge. Fear dissolves into curiosity. Curiosity dissolves into recognition. Recognition dissolves into familiarity. Not because the unknown becomes known in detail, but because it becomes relatable. Another reset, softly stated. What feels alien is often simply what has not yet been placed in context. Now, consider how this plays out in everyday awareness. You may find that you are less interested in arguments about what is right or wrong, true or false, and more interested in how different perspectives arise, not to judge them, to understand their state. You may notice that certainty feels less important than clarity, that winning feels less relevant than coherence, that control feels less necessary than alignment. This is not passivity, it is stability. Stability that comes from knowing that your experience is not being imposed but selected by the state you are in. This is where the idea of responsibility shifts meaning. Responsibility no longer means fix the world. It means be honest about your state. Because your state is the lens through which the world is revealed to you. And changing the lens changes the world you can see. Not symbolically, literally. This is why effort in the old sense begins to feel inefficient. Pushing against reality from within a misaligned state only increases friction, whereas small adjustments in perception can result in large changes in experience. Not through control, through resonance. Another reorientation. Alignment is not something you achieve. It is something you allow. You allow yourself to stop insisting on definitions that no longer fit. You allow yourself to feel what feels naturally expansive, not as escape, but as orientation. You allow yourself to trust that your state is a navigation system, not a flaw. This trust does not make you passive, it makes you responsive to what is actually present, rather than to what you think should be present. Now this brings us to the third soft point of connection, around what would feel like the 20-minute region in a spoken version. The sense that something larger is unfolding is not meant to create anticipation. It is meant to create familiarity. Later, this will be understood not as waiting for an event, but as recognizing a process you have already been participating in. For now, let that idea remain in the background. Let's return to the idea of parallel versions of reality and how they relate to collective experience. From this perspective, there is no single future that must be revealed to everyone in the same way. There are many overlapping futures, each coherent within a particular range of states. Some are dense, fear-based, and conflict-oriented. Some are exploratory, open, and integrative. Some are transitional, containing elements of both. None of them are punishments. None of them are rewards. They are simply reflections. Reflections of how consciousness is currently defining itself. This is why disclosure, contact, and paradigm shifts cannot be forced through information alone. Information does not change state. State changes the meaning of information. The same data can terrify one person and reassure another, not because of the data, because of the lens. So the real transition is not from ignorance to knowledge, it is from contraction to openness, from a self-image that feels small and threatened to one that feels stable enough to encounter difference without collapsing. That stability is not arrogance. It is not superiority. It is neutrality. Neutrality that allows curiosity without fear and discernment without defense. This is the emotional signature of alignment with a wider field of reality, another gentle reset. You do not need to become extraordinary. You only need to become natural in a broader context. When your sense of self is no longer exclusively tied to a single story of origin, purpose, and destiny, the universe feels less like a stage and more like an environment of intelligence, not of randomness, not because everything is planned, but because everything is coherent within its own level. Now think about how this changes the meaning of the end of the old world. It does not mean the end of physical structures. It means the end of the assumption that those structures define what is possible. It means the end of the idea that reality is limited to what has already been collectively agreed upon. It means the end of the belief that consciousness is a byproduct rather than the primary field. These endings do not happen with noise. They happen when fewer and fewer people feel emotionally invested in defending the old definitions, not out of rebellion, out of irrelevance. When a definition no longer explains your experience, it quietly loses authority. You do not fight it, you outgrow it. This is maturation, not revolution. And maturation does not need to announce itself, it simply changes what feels real. Another reorientation, near the close. What is emerging is not a new belief system. It is a new relationship to knowing, a relationship that is comfortable with uncertainty because it trusts the coherence of the larger field. A relationship that does not need guarantees because it senses continuity beyond form. A relationship that does not cling to identity because it experiences itself as process. In that relationship, the idea of contact, of expanded intelligence, of parallel civilizations, does not feel like an invasion of normality. It feels like a widening of it. Normal becomes larger, not more intense, more inclusive. This is why the final phase of this transition is not about revelation. It is about recognition. Recognition that what you are is not confined to one timeline, one body, one story, or one version of the world. Not as a concept, as a lived sense. And when that recognition becomes stable, the question of when becomes less important than the question of how it feels to be here now. Because the present is the only point of access to any version of reality. Not the past, not the future, only this. And in this, your state is the interface. It is the translator between consciousness and experience. It is the selector among parallel possibilities. It is the quiet decision, made without words, about what kind of universe you are able to perceive. So the continuation of this story is not in events. It is in alignment, not something to chase, something to notice. The noticing itself is the shift, and the shift does not conclude. It deepens.